So back around the end of 2023, if you happen to be on the internet and places where anime and manga were discussed, you might have heard of a little thing called Kagurabachi. And to be honest, I find a lot of these memes to be pretty funny, which led me to want to go down the rabbit hole and figure out what the heck is the deal with this Kagurabachi thing. People are raving about it, but I don't know anything about it other than the fact that there's a bunch of memes and this sword guy can apparently solo Goku or something, I don't know. So I did what a lot of sensible people would do. I opened up my Shonen Jump app, went through every chapter of Kagurabachi over the course of a couple days, and boy oh boy, was I not prepared for what I experienced. And thus, I am here, good people of YouTube, to tell you that Kagurabachi is more than just a meme. It is a fresh, young shonen series with a lot of potential that has gotten its hooks deep within me. But that's enough of this introduction. Let's go ahead and dive into the elements of Kagurabachi, like the story, the characters, and the action that make it something that you might want to read yourself. So I'm sure a lot of people are wondering this. What is Kagurabachi about? Well, in the simplest sense, it's a revenge story, at least partially. You see, we have our main character Chihiro here, who is currently on a quest to find a group of magical sorcerers who are responsible for the death of his father and stealing a number of swords that have been enchanted with magical abilities of their own. You see, because Chihiro's father is the creator of these numbered enchanted blades, and they all have the ability to like take the wielder's spiritual energy or chakra, I guess if you want to call it that, and then they use it to create these magical effects that have very devastating abilities and powers behind them. Like, for example, we got swords that can shoot lightning, or they can summon goldfish. Trust me, this one makes a lot of sense when you actually read the story. And thus, it is up to Chihiro and friend of the family Shiba to get revenge for what happened to the father. They have to go retrieve the swords from the sorcerers before they can spark an all-out war in the community. Chihiro and Shiba's quest will have them tangoing with the likes of the Yakuza, underworld weapons dealers, and of course, a lot of other sorcerers who have their own agendas. So if I had to kind of describe Kagurabachi by comparing it to other things, I would say it feels like it's John Wick mixed with a little bit of Kill Bill, and for the anime heads out there, there's some Bleach in there. And yet it never feels like it's just those other things. It is very much its own thing. It feels pretty unique. A big part of this can be attributed to some of the characteristics of the standout characters. I've already mentioned the MC Chihiro, but here he is. He can come off at first feeling like he's a tropey, edgy type of character, but he's not really that at all. He actually grows quite rapidly in depth once you get more interactions between him and his father, and you kind of see some of the lessons that he grew up being taught. And like, despite the fact that a large part of the story is him trying to get revenge for the death of his father, and the fact that his personality is, he's kind of a quiet, introverted type of person, he actually never strays into brooding edgelord territory. Like, there's actually quite a few moments where he's able to show the kinder side of him. Like, there are quite a few times where he will go out of his way to protect other people, like the defenseless people, even if it's going to make his task all the more difficult. But make no mistake, when the time calls for it, he's got no reservations with drawing his katana and just beheading an entire room full of Yakuza goons. But he will always make time to drive the little girl around town so that she can get a Happy Meal. So kind of go back what I said earlier, where I'm comparing something to something people may already be familiar with. If I describe Chihiro, I'd say he's actually a lot like Guts from Berserk. Only he's not he's not as traumatized. I mean, he's gone through the ringer, but it's not as bad as Guts. I think the dynamic that really exemplifies the nicer parts of Chihiro is the way he interacts with this little girl named Char. She is a little orphan who happens to be hunted down by people who may or may not be related to the sorcerers that Chihiro's looking for. And I don't think there's any question in my mind, but the most emotional scenes we've gotten at Kagurabachi so far have had Char included in them. And now normally having an orphaned little girl with a cute looking face, it can make the garnering of sympathy feel kind of cheap, but I never felt like Char was cheap. I feel like a lot of her interaction with the other characters, the chemistry she has, and just the personality she has, I feel it all feels pretty genuine. And so whenever she ended up going through some rough times, I was legitimately like, okay, we need to save this little girl. Now, unfortunately, most of the other side casts, they don't really have a lot of time to jump into the spotlight and show off what they're capable of. And yeah, we have folks like Shiba, who I mentioned earlier. We got Azami, we got Hinao, but you know, other than the occasional funny one-liner, they don't really do much. But I will say, we got this group of sorcerers who work for the government called the Kamunabi or something like that. There's a bunch of them. They'll have cool designs, and they feel like they could end up being important later on. Some of them. I mean, just look at these dudes. Like, look at the designs. They're all super cool, super unique, and they all got some awesome powers, and they're not afraid to show them off against some bad guys. But I cannot end a discussion talking about the characters of Kagurabachi without mentioning a certain somebody. That certain somebody is Genichi Sojo. He is an antagonist that ends up getting introduced relatively early on into the series, and he is just such a perfect foil for Chihiro. Using his connections as an underworld weapons dealer, he actually manages to get his hands on one of these enchanted blades, this one being called Cloud Gorger. And not only does Sojo just have this fascination with weapons, but in particular, he is like a super fanboy of Chihiro's father because he thinks he just created the most amazing things. Like, Sojo looks at these swords and he does not see just mere swords, but he's like, these are the greatest weapons ever created. These are works of art, which stands in stark contrast to the way Chihiro views his things, because even though he looks at them and he's like, yeah, these are some of the best things my father has ever done, he doesn't really view them as weapons. He's like, these are tools meant to bring peace. So naturally, this leads to a lot of butting of the heads, a lot of clashes between these two guys. And they're both very skilled swordsmen. They know what they're doing. So to me, their dynamic kind of feels a little bit reminiscent of like the classic Batman and the Joker. We have two of these guys and they're pushing each other's buttons, and they're both pushing each other to rise up. They're both getting stronger and better because of each other. And needless to say, they have quite a few fights, even in just the handful of chapters that are out, and they are all amazing. Now, I've said it a few times on this channel, but I'm going to say it again. I'm not really all that big of a fan of the way action is depicted in manga. Now, like, other than Akira Toriyama's run of Dragon Ball, most of it just the idea is cooler than the actual execution. Like, so for me, I prefer seeing the action sequences in anime rather than reading them in the manga. Ideas like the panel layout and conveying the flow of motion, and also depicting the impact of every blow. All this stuff is just like really, really difficult to pull off well. And I'm here to tell you that Kagurabachi succeeds in all of these quite well, in my opinion. From every slash of a sword, from every explosion caused by two magical abilities coming into contact with each other. Like, there's just so much bombastic action in this comic, and the way you feel the motion, like the characters feel like they're moving really fast, and it's just all done very smoothly. Like, I honestly can't recall the last time I have read a manga and just been like, wow, it is actually really fun to read these action sequences. Like, okay, let's go. And another note I'll throw in here, despite being a Shonen Jump title, Kagurabachi kind of rides that line between being like a mature seinen and just a typical shonen. It's pretty bloody, it's pretty gory. You often see limbs and heads getting cut off. You'll see people bleed profusely. So just throwing it out there. But you know, if you like that kind of stuff. So needless to say, I've been enjoying the setting, the story, the characters. But is there anything that I feel like I need to nitpick about this series other than the weaker side cast I already mentioned? Well, I guess if I had to like really nitpick some things, like I do feel like sometimes the dialogue comes off feeling a little unnatural. Like you'll get these scenes where there are two or more characters interacting with each other, but it kind of feels like it's more of a group of AI rather than humans interacting. And then that kind of go along with that, like there are definitely quite a few scenes early on where you have a character trying to explain a thing to another character, but it's like it's just being done for the sake of the audience. Both of these characters should be very, very familiar with the concept that's being talked about, but we gotta get the exposition out there so the reader understands what the heck is going on. As you can imagine though, some of these nitpicks they're bigger issues early on, and as the story progresses, it becomes less and less of a thing I noticed. And to throw one more thing in there, just trying to be fair, I am somewhat concerned about the long-term sustainability of the series. Like, what I mean by that is the fact that the general scale of the cast and the story is still relatively small. Like Chihiro and Chihiro are like, all right, we gotta find the sorcerers and we gotta get the swords back. But then, like, other than that, it's like, I don't know what else there could be. Like, I totally understand keeping it relatively small for the time being. Like, obviously, we're just getting started the story. The fact that this, it was a new series in Shonen. And we know how cutthroat Shonen Jump can be sometimes. So, like, I totally understand the author want to be like, yeah, if I had to wrap things up within the next 5 chapters, it would be doable. But I do think we're starting to get a couple of seeds planted here and there for the long term. The most recent chapter does get me a little excited. We got a couple of them seeds planted. We got a new arc starting. We got this black market full of weapons that we're gonna go investigate. We got the introduction of some new sorcerer families. So I may be getting what I wanted. So Kagurabachi turned out to be more exciting than I was anticipating. It's not just a meme. It's a very fun, action-packed revenge story with an enjoyable MC, interesting antagonists, a magic system that has a lot of potential to develop into something pretty cool, and of course, a whole lot of sword porn. While it's not perfect by any means, nothing really is. So it should come as absolutely no surprise that I'm recommending people check it out for themselves. There's only like 19 or 20 chapters out right now. It's a very quick, easy read. You can decide for yourselves whether you give it a thumbs up or the thumbs down. But I'm going to say, if you have read Kagurabachi already, sound off down in the comments. Let me know. Spread the good word of Tanoi. Before I sign off here, though, guys, I just want to give a big thanks to the most recent member of the channel, Xjuice360. Thank you so much for your continued support. I appreciate you. And if you want to get a shout out at the end of the video, make sure you join down below with that little join button, or hop into the weekly game streams where I may or may not be giving out some memberships. We'll see what happens. But thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.